So, do you ever find yourself thinking, I wonder what my child's life would have been like if they were born just a few decades earlier? I know as a parent, I have those thoughts. And when I look back on my college days back in the 1970s, because I am that old, I remember going to visit, or not really visit, going to see this state institution in Pennsylvania. And, it was just like the photos that you see of institutions. Beautiful green rolling hills, wonderfully landscaped, but this this silence, no one walking around, no one experiencing the life there. Um, And I remember walking up to the main building. And of course, it's one of those gigantic stone buildings that you picture for state institutions. And one of the administrators took us on a walk down one side of the building. And I remember those wide concrete sidewalks and just taking step after step, knowing that in a few minutes we were going to be looking inside this state institution. And it was really hard for me to engage in any conversation, to look up, because I just felt this nervousness. And when we got up to the big double doors, she opened them, and I looked up, and there was this long room filled with these metal crib-like beds. And as we walked down the center aisle, many of the beds along the wall were empty. But as we walked, it was like, I can't believe this is how some children are living every day. And they were in these metal crib-like beds, no books, not a toy, wearing these hospital-like gowns, not even with clothes. And it was like I could not, believe that this was a real world. And here as a college student, I was seeing the inside of this state institution. Well, you fast forward it about 15 years, and our youngest son, Dylan, was born. And Dylan happens to have Down syndrome. And when I was thinking about the life that I wanted for Dylan, now that he was born in 1988, and I thought back to that college visit, that college time where I was in that state institution as an outsider, as an observer. And I thought, if Dylan had been born a couple decades earlier, this could have been his life if he was born to a family that trusted what the doctor said and decided the best thing was to put their child away. Now, I don't say that to be dramatic, but we do have to come to terms with this is still a happening in many states. There are still state institutions. So we do have some work, right, that still lies ahead for us. The good news is today we're going to talk some about the barriers for inclusive communities, but we're also going to talk about some wonderful, positive, energetic strategies that we can use as parent advocates to create change. So if I haven't met you before, I'm Charmaine Tanner. I'm a parent, a retired teacher, an advocate, and I also host this Art of Advocacy weekly live show. So I am excited because I'm going to bring up our guest for today. And we are lucky because we have two guests that are pretty phenomenal leaders, not only in the disability rights movement, but also policy changes, social justice issues, environmental issues. And so I want to welcome Angela and her son, Dan, and say we are so pleased that you can be here and be a part of this conversation today.
Thanks for the invitation. We're excited to be able to share some of what we've been learning and enjoying.
Well, and I think, like many of us, I think, Angela, we probably first met virtually. And then as an attendant at your All Born In conference for several years, I've always had this connection with you as far as similar values and some similar life experiences. And Dan, I remember you at the All Born In conference dancing, and my son Dylan dancing, and you guys having a great time. But I also, Dan, was so influenced by the work that you do with your social justice group, your youth group. And I know you have some slides to share with us today. Would you like us to start with your slides?
Yeah.
Okie dokie. Let's bring that up.
Do you want to read it?
Yeah. I am Daniel Jarvis Holland, college student, artist, Ruth, and Pensado, MBA, social justice group. I have been advocating since I was 4 years old, going to state capitol in Washington, D.C. Our families believed early on that we belonged and should have a voice.
Sorry.
No worries. I believe in belonging and independence. I did my own IEP and relation and connection plan for high school. In my final term, I was independent with no intervention sentence, EA. I graduated from Benson High with a media major. From my job, I saved my pay to buy a laptop and an iPhone for college.
That's a good amount of money to be saving there.
And can I just ask, Dan,
Sure.
if we can go back to that slide. Do you remember who that guy is?
I'm able to ask him about college and name Ron Wyden.
He's a senator in Oregon. So Dan did some advocacy with Ron Wyden, didn't you?
We did talk about college with him.
Cool. I know. You know a lot of famous people, Dan. Don't you think?
Yeah. I studied media arts and graduated high school with a modified diploma. I have worked for Parks and Regulations for 3 summers. I am taking media classes at PCC in Metro East Media. I want to get a job or have my own business. I want to live in my own place. I want to be part of my community. I want to be fair and kind.
I know. So I was thinking, Dan, so are you ready to leave the nest and kind of spread your wings with your own place?
Well, if I can just say, Dan's told me that he's 21 and he's a grown-ass man.
No.
Well, then I think that means you're ready.
You did do a class, didn't you? What was the class? What was the name that did the class?
Ellen? Okay.
Was it Allison? Dan did, I think you did a 6-week course on how you get ready to move out and how you get
Allison,
yeah, you got references, didn't you? And it just seems like it's still a lot of work to try and get employment, especially in Portland. So one thing we know is, like, if you're trying to do something big, you've got to have some help. But Dan did the course himself with his support person, and you're on some lists, aren't you, for housing and hoping to get on?
And moving.
Yeah, all about moving and how you're ready and what you need to save for.
Cool. Yeah, because those are big things, right? And just figuring out a budget, like how much rent would be, all those kinds of big decisions, right? Let me bring back your PowerPoint here. Oops. Where did it go?
I went to Fairview with my family and a friend. Fairview was a state hospital where they kept kids and adults with disabilities without their families. They have torn it down. It was sad thinking about my history. We made brick and barrels rewards from the rubble we got at Fairview. The buildings have been torn down. Now we have to tear down our attitudes and pretensions.
True.
Thank you, Daniel Jarvis Holland, public speaker, photographic student, and advocate. Contact me, danjh1999@gmail.com.
Thank you, Dan. And I'm so glad that you shared your contact information with everybody. We also have a film that we'll save for a little bit of a film that Dan and his friend Eddie star in, going to that last institution that was closed in Oregon, breaking barriers. And so we'll be seeing that movie in our show today also. And I wanted to let you know that we are going to have a book giveaway today. We haven't given away a book in a while. This is a wonderful book called Here to Stay, Americans with Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities by Michael Bailey, who is another wonderful advocate in the Portland area. And this is an important book, I think, for us as parents, for teachers, to really understand some of that human history and the importance of knowing what was helpful to make change in the past, but also some effective strategies that we can use now to make change. So what I'll do is at the end of the show, I'll just scroll through the comments and I'll stop, and that will be the lucky person, and I will get you your own copy of Here to Stay by Michael Bailey. So I'm excited about that. We are going to talk a little bit about the barriers that we still see in inclusive communities, and what that looks like for adults. And then also to look at the Olmstead case, the Supreme Court case, to say a few things about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and also to dive into the Olmstead case a little bit more with some of the background story about that important case. But first I thought, Angela and Dan, maybe we could just have a conversation about, I think a lot of times we focus on inclusive education, which is like so important. And now as our kids are becoming young adults, it's like, oh, now what kinds of inclusive communities do we have? So Dan or Angela, do you have, if you could share some thoughts that you have about, making sure that our inclusive communities really do accept and honor people with, disabilities?
Well, Dan, why don't you show our necklaces?
Oh, let's see.
Let me see if I can get that up there. It is a wolf. And
cool.
Dan says that the wolf's his spirit animal, and they're like,
I love it.
The idea of a pack animal, the idea of, like he likes the values of that animal, like their loyalty, their.
I got this. Wildness, family instincts, friendship, fingerprints, loyalty, protection, playfulness, curiosity, and teamwork.
So, like, from being really young, I'd already got a 5-year-old, and I thought to myself, you get so overwhelmed by all the things that you're supposed to learn because your kiddo's got a disability and all this different track you're on. And I got a bit tired of it. And then I just thought, you know what would I have done for my other child? And then I started just thinking that way. And then we looked for preschools that were good preschools, not special preschools. We looked for parks and rec programs that would really welcome us and whatever. And I think it took a shift in my mind. And then I heard Kathy Snow speak, and Kathy talks about disability is natural. And I think when you're a parent and you've got a real little one, it's like if somebody's going to therapy 2 times a week, I'm going to be twice as good and go 4 times a week.
Right.
And then after a while, you're like, oh my God, this is wearing me out. And my other kid's really sick of being dragged to that appointment with me. And then I just started thinking, what is it you really want? What do you want for your family? And then really quickly, we started seeing Dan's preferences. Like Dan loved water when he was little. He loved messing in colors and art. So it was a coming together of like, I can have a different vision, but also I need to pay attention what rings Dan's bell. And that, I think, put us on the path that we were on to just say, hey, community, you say that you've got a preschool that's for all. Well, we're part of that all. So how are we going to do this?
Oh, exactly. And I think it just makes such a difference to start at that young age. And that's not to say that you can't make change when your child is older, but, I think it reaffirms that path that you want your child to take throughout his life. And so I know that was like really important for us too with Dylan, is just a community preschool where he could have fun and play with kids, So yeah, it's nice to see that happen. And so Dan, now as you're 21, so what do you see as far as, times to get together with your friends? And I know COVID makes everything a little bit more difficult, right? But, like I know, like you said, that you're looking at, do I get on a list for housing? And, what are some things that I can start doing right now to, kind of be ready for that time when I move out of my parents' house? So what do you think about, Dan?
Those classes maybe, and having your own Zoom account. Do you want to talk about those?
No, I think so.
So, I mean, everything's moved online, and for Dan, it's the sore spot because you're such a social guy, and I don't think that's any different from most 21-year-olds. Like, for instance, Dan got in trouble with us because up the road, he'd gone for a walk, and there was a bar. What was the sign outside it?
No.
Cool beer, hot chick.
Oh.
Mom, you're embarrassing me.
So Dan had gone in there. Like a lot of things that 21-year-olds are doing and experiencing just aren't available to anyone right now. So it's not my favorite thing to talk about. But I will say that Dan is exploring a website of his own. He's got an Instagram page with your photos. You're doing Portland Community College classes to keep building skills. And some things are just on hold, and we've agreed that's how it is. Right. But you are a leader still. I mean, you're doing trainings, you're helping other youth. So perhaps that's how you're still staying connected to some things. Is there anything else you would say that you enjoy online?
I just like talking to my friends.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah, we got Dan a Zoom account really early on. Like, you shouldn't just be the person that other people are going to Zoom you. Like, Dan can decide who he's going to Zoom and set those Zooms up. And I think we've got to make sure that the things that we've now got instead of our usual way of doing stuff, that we're making sure, like, Dan doesn't have to ask me or wait for somebody to get in touch with him. He can send a Zoom invite to people, and he's better at it than I am.
I know. So that is so cool. And yeah, you might as well take advantage of the technology we have, right? You know, and it is fun to be able to at least, you know, FaceTime or do a Zoom call with our friends, right? So that's important. I think that connection. And I was thinking too that, you know, I wanted to spend just a minute or two in appreciation for all the things that, you know, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has, you know, provided for not only people with disabilities, but women's rights and, you know, the human side of life, and her ability to, you know, be logical and think things through as a Supreme Court justice, but also coming back to those essential questions and the type of people that we want to be, the type of society that we want to have in our country. And so I honor her, and I know, Angela, you know, you also, you know, if you'd like to say a few words about her as we think of her today when we start talking about the Olmstead decision.
Yeah, I think, I mean, there's nuances and loopholes that frustrate us sometimes when we see the final product, but she really carried the torch for the idea of human dignity, and that it means all of us. So anyone with that amount of power, thinking that deeply, really at the heart of all this is, do we belong? Do we belong in our country? Do we belong in our community? Do we belong in our schools? And I think she really had a very deep sense of justice around that. And at the heart of everything that I do with Dan and my other child, it's about belonging. And I think this time of so many divisions and so much stress in our country, and we're in Portland where there's a lot of visibility of the problems, we have to remember the basics. And I think although she did very complex and deep thinking, I feel like I kind of would have really enjoyed sitting at a table with her, because at her heart, she was about human dignity and some notion beyond just a slogan of equity. So being on this call today, it feels timely. And I just would like to say that that's a reminder for me as well, that we stand on a lot of shoulders, and the days when we're tired, to just remember how many people have fought for things that really have helped see progress, and that we do get to be a part of history sometimes. And I appreciate all that she brought to the court, and her thoughtfulness and her humanity. Yeah.
Oh, I know. And it's just, I don't know, it's important for us to know the history, but also important for us, like I said, to, you know, look at the lessons that we've learned and to continue to create more positive change. And we've got some wonderful people with us. I want to give a shout out to Karen from Colorado. And yeah, so she said, kids need kid stuff and to be appreciated for who they are.
I was on YouTube. I'm just like, I want to protect kids on videos.
Yeah.
That's important. Yeah. Especially now that kids have more time at home and they've got more screen time happening, right? And I was also going to share, Gracie said, RGB carried the torch for human dignity. That's beautiful. So yes. And Mindy says, thank you for your lovely words, Angela. And Amy also, I think, talking back about, you know, what you said with Kathy Snow, as far as more does not equal better. You know, less can be more sometimes, right? And Karen, this is interesting. She said, I think 5 is the magic number. That's when I stopped and really took inventory and decided what I wanted my kid's life to look like. Yeah. So thank you, because I want this to be interactive, you know, so the more that you can add your thoughts and comments, I think it's really helpful. We can, you know, engage in some conversation about things. And I guess to spark some conversation, I have a YouTube video about the Olmstead case. And what I'm going to do is just take some really quick clips from it, but we can talk about, you know, some of the aspects. The first clip is when the attorney for the legal aid in Atlanta, you know, went to the Georgia State Hospital, and she talks about meeting one of the plaintiffs in the Olmstead case, Lois Curtis. And I just thought it's nice to kind of get that human aspect of this is an important Supreme Court case, but let's look at the lives of the people that helped drive, you know, the change. So let me key up this YouTube video for us and just cross your fingers, everything works, right? So Dan or Angela, do you want, do you want to say anything before we start this video?
Just that we've visited DC and Dan's done advocacy there. We did advocacy around the ABLE Act, which allows people to have savings. And we went to the steps of the Supreme Court. And so seeing that picture as the first one up there, it's like, I think just include your kids in their history is really powerful. You know, we have that photo and we talk about that visit still.
Right. Oh, exactly. Okay, so I'm going to start it here from the beginning, and we'll just go a couple minutes and then we'll pause.
We'll hear argument now, number 98, 536, Tommy Olmstead versus LC by Jonathan Zimrin.
I first met Lois when she was a teenager. I'd known her for, I'd say, almost 9 years, off and on, when we filed the Olmstead case. I sort of recognized her at the state hospital. Some social worker brought her to my attention because I don't think Lois would have thought to ask for legal assistance. But as soon as I met her and we talked, you know, she definitely had no hesitation in saying that, as we always say, what is it that you think we could do for you? I work at legal aid and I'm a lawyer. And she'd say, get me out of here. Would you please get me out of here? When am I getting out of here? She called me Jamie right from the first day, and she could use the phone. She would call and say, Jamie, would you please get me out of here? So her request for legal assistance was very clear right from the beginning. I would say her treating physician and the psychologist, particularly at the hospital, were all frustrated that she was stuck there. At that point in Georgia, there was a program, as you know, for people with developmental disabilities with an enormously long waiting list. And if you were in a state hospital, guess what? You were not eligible. You had to be in a mental retardation hospital, and then they put you on the list. So that's one of the reasons they were throwing up their hands in the hospital. Social workers are saying she needs this particular program, but she's not eligible because she happens to be in the wrong place. We had a
So I would love to hear, you know, people's reactions. So if you're live with us or in the replay, you know, make sure that you put in your comments there. And I think what struck me for part of this clip was talking about those rules that we have, right? And the different systems having different rules, and you can't apply for these services unless you meet this criteria. And that is still happening today, right? That we have these silos of systems. And that is still frustrating to me, especially as my son is an adult and looking at what kinds of supports are available. But Angela and Dan, your thoughts about that first clip?
Well, how do you feel about people being in an institution rather than their homes? You had some strong thoughts, didn't you?
Yeah.
How do you feel?
I want you to feel.
Well, I'd say that Dan quite often says, free our people. And, you know, at lots of meetings or at the end of events, Dan says it. It can sound like a slogan, but I see that, and that's what it is. Free them, free our people.
Oh, exactly. I know. And that's Eleanor here on the cover, right?
Yeah, she taught Dan that phrase. Do you remember her teaching it you? Do you want to do it? Show them how they do it.
No, you.
No, I'm not. I can't because it's your phrase.
You got it, Mom.
No, show me and then I'll do it.
Right. Free our people.
Yeah.
Yes. 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 Thank you. Thank you. That is so important, right? And that's what we have to always come back to, that's the value that we're going to be basing decisions on, right? Is the human dignity and freedom for all. And not to have those segregated kinds of environments anymore. I was going to bring up Rochelle.
Oh, we know Rochelle too.
Yeah, you guys know Rochelle. She says, unbind the ties that keep us from liberty. So, yeah, I mean, I'd
just like to say one thing as well, that we've been pretty involved in some ADA work recently in a bond that's coming up in Portland, and Dan's going to speak tonight on a launch for that bond. But the original work, the Black Panther movement supported the protesters, brought them food as people with disabilities were in those rooms occupying and making the fight and making the case. And, you know, these are intersectional issues that sometimes we can forget, that we're talking also about liberty of people of color,
right,
people who again have disabilities. And I think the Social Justice Youth Group's been thinking more about those issues, and that we're much stronger when we can remember and reference that and show our gratitude, because that original movement really needed the voice of the Black community, who stood with and supported in a way that was really vital. So intersectional advocacy is really powerful.
Oh, exactly. And I think, thank you for bringing that up, because I think, you know, I have to remind myself that, you know, even though I talk a lot about, you know, advocacy for people with disabilities, but it's really, you know, we have to expand that, right? I mean, there are so many kids in our schools and people in our communities that are marginalized and that aren't accepted and that aren't supported with, you know, building on their strengths. And so it's a much bigger movement versus just the special ed rights. And that's why I think, you know, it's important. And I know, like, from, you know, Judy Human's efforts, and then also if people have seen the movie Crip Camp, they'll recognize, like you said, all the support that the Black Panther movement gave while people were in wheelchairs, you know, trying to get access to buildings and buses and
Or council.
Yes. So all of that, right, is so important. And the next clip I'm going to show from this Olmstead film talks about the power of advocacy organizations and self-advocates like you, Dan, and why it's so important for our young people to be involved with this social justice movement. So let me advance here the YouTube film. So Angela, if you want to be our co-anchor and fill in while I'm doing the production work.
Yeah, I think we need to find ways to make things digestible for our kids and just make it part of your conversations as well. You know, it can seem a long way away, policy, but just helping people celebrate. You know, we celebrate things with Dan about our history. We celebrate, you know, the anniversaries of ADA and whatever else, and hold those things in our conversations. I think it's been helpful for Dan to own that and have some power around that.
Right, right. Thank you. So let's cue this one up.
And I think they were affected when they looked around that court.
All of a sudden, we noticed in the background this rising crescendo of advocacy, concern, and support. Again, I'll mention ADAPT because they were right there, and the PNA, Protection and Advocacy Organization, Mental Health Association of Georgia, a lot of community advocacy organizations became increasingly involved. By the time we went to the district court argument, the courtroom was full of people from those organizations, but with their help, full of individuals with disabilities, and lots of people who use wheelchairs everywhere, filling the courtroom. And that happened at the 11th Circuit also.
We knew we'd probably be in trouble when we saw our panel. We thought Judge.
And I'm going to give you the link for this video. It's on YouTube, so it's really accessible. But I know we had limited time today, so I wanted to just pick out some key points. But to me, the way that the community stood up and packed the courthouses, both for the district court and when this case went to the 11th Circuit Court, did make an influence. And I think it's so important for us today, with all the division that we have in our country, to look for opportunities and possibilities where we can connect with others and, you know, look for those global values that we want to make sure that our country is still holding true to.
Oh, I did and did make a video on my YouTube channel. I did make about climate change.
Yeah, I know, because you've been involved in a lot of things besides disability rights, which I think is important too, that we don't just kind of, you know, channel our kids into disability issues when they've got other issues. And so, yeah. Dan, what were some of the things that you talked about in your climate change video?
Feel like climate change, like for protests with climate change.
You've done protests. They made a video with lots of different diverse people, and I think maybe there's a lesson in there. Like, if we want people to show up for us, we have to be showing up. And Dan's been pretty involved. There's a group that's called the Portland Parent Union. It's an African-American group. And you call her Miss Sheila, the woman that runs it, don't you? And we've been barbecues and we've become family friends, but we're also turning up when they do things about the pipeline to prison or overrepresentation of kids of color. And it's really appreciated and noticed, because you kind of stand out as somebody with a disability. It kind of throws people, because they think, oh, he's going to be here advocating about disability, but we have to advocate, you know, for the world that we want to belong to and to contribute to that. And again, everyone can have different politics, but it needs to be, we need to think in a bipartisan way, and we need to think in a way that says, I'm going to show up. Right. And then I can ask people to show up when we need them.
Exactly. Exactly. And if you look at, you know, the history as far as the parent movement and the changes that groups of parents made, and that powerful impact that parents can have. And one of the things that I often say is that we need to widen our circle. You know, it's not just, like you said, you know, connecting with other families with children with disabilities, but it's having, you know, a community focus of what we can do in our school climate and what we can do in our towns to make changes. And I think when we only are a small group of parents of disabled kids, that they see us as a special interest group, and that they don't see how this goal can actually reach to other kids. So I think as much as we can invite others to be in our circle, and stand with them as we speak up for issues that are important to them, and they also support us, it makes a huge difference. And it's such a better feeling of working together with people, right?
Well, it's also a responsibility because, yeah, there's challenges in my life because Dan has a disability, but I have had a lot of opportunities and a lot of investment in me. And I'm a white woman with a big voice sometimes. So I think there's also a responsibility, the same as there's a responsibility to bring Dan's voice forward, to think about where I can support and strengthen the message from other communities that are also facing prejudice in other areas of community and life.
Right, right. So, yes. And then, so we're going to see another little clip, and it's talking about the day before, when the attorneys in Lois and Elaine, who also joined as a plaintiff, went to the Supreme Court the day before. They heard the oral arguments, and then the day of, and then the attorney that represented Lois and Elaine and her interpretation of the court's ruling. So we'll look at that. I should cue you again, okay, Angela? Let me find the next spot here.
I just want to say thank you for people that have tuned in and that are thinking with us today. It's always gratifying to know that we're not on our own, and that these things are important to a lot of us all over the country. And virtual land at least gives us that opportunity that we can be in different states and yet be together. So there's a plus. If we need to scratch hard, we can find some pluses for COVID.
That's true. That's true. Okay, so I'm almost there. Oops. It would help if I would push play.
The day before the argument, and that's when I was just amazed at what I saw, which was the entire, you know, those august steps up to the pillars were covered or filled with individuals in wheelchairs for the most part, and other people with disabilities, with placards and signs and chants. It was fabulous. And then they were there all night long. And when we got there in the morning for the argument, they were still there. And of course, by then they were lined up to come in and see the argument. What dawned on me as I sat there was the judges, the justices are really getting it. You know, you just thought, are they ever going to really understand what it means for a person to be locked up in a state hospital like Lois and Elaine? Or their world must be so far away from what is happening to people locked up in Georgia. And so I remember getting this sense during that experience that somehow or other, thank goodness, these people had thought enough and had the capacity to understand the issue. And you could tell that from the way they kept challenging the Attorney General from Georgia by asking really pointed questions, showing that they were not too sympathetic with the state's argument.
The opinion of the court in number 98-536, Olmstead versus LC, will be announced by Justice Ginsburg.
Yay, Justice Ginsburg.
This case concerns Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, a measure I will abbreviate as the ADA.
I can't remember the precise experience of finding it out, although I think somebody called me on the phone and then I figured out how to read it online. That's what I remember, because I remember reading it online and thinking, this is the most complicated convoluted decision because it was in three parts. There was the decision by Justice Ginsburg, which was great, although it had some language in it that at first I could hardly breathe because I was reading and I was so excited, but I thought, uh-oh, I hope that's not too bad. And then there was the concurring part, which looked a little worse, and then there was the dissent. So to answer your question, my initial response was, it looks as if we sort of won. The sort of was Justice Ginsburg said, we agree that states cannot keep people in institutions unnecessarily, and that violates the ADA. But she said, I'm going to make that ruling qualified by three things. One, if staff agree that. And if the state can accommodate this person without fundamentally altering its system. So that is legalese to beat the ban, because all you could immediately think of is courts are going to figure that out, over time. But what does it really mean today? Right at the beginning, we actually thought Georgia would do the right thing. And we thought, wow, they've been litigating this for almost 6 years. They lost, and now they're going to say, okay, Supreme Court, we'll do the right thing. But in fact, they did very little. And it was partly because of that part of Justice Ginsburg's decision that was wiggly enough.
But it doesn't mean that there isn't still something powerful that's established. It just means it's still going to be work, I think, for us all. Dan, do you want to tell them about the bond in Portland while we're waiting? That you have made a statement about ADA? Schools that are not your home school. And we have, in the bond measure, we managed to insert a measure that will mean that all schools will be at least accessible on the ground floor, which it's not enough, but it's a start. And obviously any new school built will be fully accessible, plus that there'll be differentiation in the curriculum. So Dan tonight is going to be on the bond launch and is actually in the statement part of the voters pamphlet. And I don't think we've seen somebody with a developmental disability actually have a statement in that pamphlet. So that's a first, Dan, for you. And I think it's like an example that a law can pass, but we still will have work to do. And that's why advocacy organizations and being together and listening to experts with disabilities, it's not always a done deal when something passes, even though I do really believe in celebrating. I think sometimes we can forget to stop and celebrate. So that was a moment of celebration, I'm sure, when that was passed. And then there was still a lot of work to be done.
But I think with the Olmstead case is, even with that decision that was made in 1999, we still see a lot of Olmstead lawsuits where people are still being segregated in more restrictive environments and discriminated against. Like when I was doing some research for the show, it was kind of amazing, some of the cases that I found. So one was a variety of high schools in Rhode Island have been having high school students that have disabilities, learn how to do this sheltered workshop, assembly line kind of work during high school instead of taking high school classes. And the whole goal was that these high school students would then be able to secure a job in the adult sheltered workshop. And I remember sheltered workshops back in the 70s. And I thought, well, when was this Rhode Island case of high school kids doing this in-school sheltered workshop? Well, come to find out, it was in 2013. So just like 7 years ago, some high school students, that was their expectations, is to get them ready to be in an adult sheltered workshop. But yeah, I was sharing some of the recent Olmstead lawsuits as far as, even though the decision was made in 1999, that doesn't mean we still don't have work to do. But Dan, I wanted to make sure that we had a chance to watch your video. Do you want to give us any setup here before we watch it?
It's like there's a video like somewhat emotional.
Yeah, it does. It makes me emotional.
That's it.
It was an emotional day.
Yeah. Angela, do you want to talk about how this video came to be with the youth group? And
Sure. Well, the video, won't give all the plot away, but it started with me getting a voicemail message, and I listened to it in the morning and it just haunted me. And then the youth group, we took them on a visit, Eddie and Dan. I just had to do something. I couldn't just sit with it. And then the youth group were really, they took it over and said, this is our business. And I think the video speaks really eloquently to that.
Thank you. Yes, that's.
Fairview, the last institution in Oregon, was torn down.
Oops, let me share.
Hey, Angela, it's Sam Sennick. I'm actually at the Fairview Training Center grounds. I just woke up early with the thought, I need to go there. And they're tearing down the last of the buildings. It was kind of heavy, so I'm just sitting here kind of reflecting. And I just wanted to say to you and Angela, I appreciate so much what you all do. And that focus on the youth, I think that's it. We gotta show that people have value, that they have dignity and love.
Fairview Training Center was a giant place. It not only employed thousands of workers, but it imprisoned up to 4,000 adults and children with developmental disabilities for half a century plus. There was a time when it seemed inconceivable that Fairview would ever close, but it did.
Dan's family was moved to take Eddie and Dan to Fairview to see the demolition and walk the grounds.
Hi, I'm Danny. I need to destroy this place.
This place is like shame for the kids. I very strong for myself that because I'm a strong advocate person. I guess I feel like the kids survived about what happened. That I don't like feeling alone in prison and stuff. It's like just this thing. It's like I guess like everybody does that. I think only like bad deals for adult kids too, like both my age. I just like feel like be like a strong man.
Thinking about Fairview and institutionalization, as a brother, the first thing that comes to mind is just that I, almost in every sense, would not have a brother if we were alive 30 years ago. I mean, I would have a brother in the technical sense that Dan exists, but I wouldn't see him. I wouldn't play sports with him. I wouldn't be picking him up from school. So in that very simple way, deinstitutionalization has given me more family, and anyone who has a connection to someone with a disability has more family because of that.
Welcome! What are you guys waiting for?
I waited for the future begins yourself.
I'm going for people to understand more of those from kids could need some help from our people, because we feel lonely without somebody nearby us.
I think I'm gonna say about my life because of you guys. I've been alone from my high school. I'm alone on lunchroom. I'm alone because you guys you touch me with show respect and who can better than everybody would want to be.
I'm waiting for kids in school to get more support. I'm waiting for our voices to be heard, for us to stop being thrown to the side like our issues don't matter, and waiting for the inclusion to happen, for us to be listened to.
We our people.
Jazz.
I know. Well, so I remember when I was at the All Born In conference and I saw that video for the first time, Dan. And do you want to talk again? I know you mentioned it in your PowerPoint, but do you want to talk again about the Breaking Barriers Awards that your youth group did?
I don't remember.
About who you gave it to, the award?
Oh, I did a reward for my old teacher, Jan Zuckerman. Yeah, the kids, because Dan and Eddie had, I think it was such an organic day. They asked, have you got a bag? They wanted to take some stuff from the place, the rubble. And then the group actually made art pieces with that rubble. And they said, you know, like the bricks have gone, but if it's still in people's minds that we don't belong, it's still not done. And they, as a group, you decided, why did you want to give it to Jan, that teacher? Because I want to show respect. And what had she done for you? Because I like taking care of. How about being included? I like, what means I like taking care about for free up people with fight for your rights to party. And at school, Jan, she didn't just look after you. I remember a day when it was an environmental school, and Dan had been complaining about a walk, and she had to apologize to me. She said, Dan might tell you, she says, today he said he was tired, and I told him, I'm tired too. We all are. Suck it up, buddy. I think Dan got included in a very real way. And when a teacher crosses that line and stops like treating you like you're somebody that's so different, our kids know it. And then that the youth group had to say who they wanted to get it and why. And Dan, you said really powerful things. And actually, Jan is now just a friend. They chat, and she's very involved in the climate change movement. And you go out for dinner with her every now and again, don't you? Yeah. She makes you pay half the time too, which is Well, I want to thank you both for being with us today. And I was telling people when I got back on to part 2 here that I'm going to have to be a little more creative with choosing the winner of the Here to Stay book from Michael Bailey. But I'm going to kind of consolidate all the comments and the names, and at another time, later this afternoon, I can draw the lucky winner and let you know, and I will be sending out a copy of Michael Bailey's book to you. So I'm so pleased that we had some time to have our conversations today, and for the people that were joining us either as live viewers or on the replay, please carry on the conversation. You know, you can continue to make comments and ask questions, and I can circle back. But I so appreciate Angela and Dan. And, you know, I feel bad because it's like I didn't even give you a proper introduction, Angela, as far as being the executive director of the Northwest Down Syndrome Association. And I lost my banners in my last place. So
would it be the allbornincommunity.org? Would that be like one of the websites that people could go
Yeah,
to?
there's a lot of nice resources on there. And also now that we've gone virtual, like we've got sessions coming up, you're actually going to be helping us with a session on virtual settings and goal writing. And there's a lot of great info from people. So be sure, and if you like, we have a Facebook page, NWDSA, and we have our web page. But get yourself, anyone that wants to, get yourself registered there, then you'll have information, because now it's obvious, like it doesn't matter if you're on the East Coast or West Coast, as long as you can make the time slot, come join us. And Charmaine, we're grateful for the partnership, and really what our community is everybody sharing what they know and what they have. I'm here sharing, and you're going to be sharing with our organization. So just remind each other that we've got more than we think sometimes, and we're not so on our own. Feels good to be here today. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And thank you to the parents who are still out there speaking out for your children. Know that you are making a difference, not only for your child and your family, but all the other families to come. And people like Angela and I that have been to a few rodeo IEP meetings are always here to support you. So thank you so much for joining us. I am Charmaine Tanner, and I will be back next Thursday. It's the first Thursday of the month, and we will have a open Q&A time. Yes, Dan.
I want to say something about the parents. Parents, you're chatting. I will take care of your kids like as good personality, and I will protect your children.
So Dan's up for you looking at the resources and knowing that he cares about your kids. And you know, it's really nice knowing that there's Eleanor, who's in that book, was a mentor to Dan. And Dan, I think you're saying you're always happy for the Social Justice Youth Group to hear from parents and their kids, especially. Dan loves replying to kids' questions. So thank you.
Good. Good. Yeah. So if you guys have some, let us know. And Dan, maybe you can lead us out with a Free Our People, and I can join you.
Free
our people. Woohoo!
Thank you. Thank you. See you next on virtual.